Welcome back to Good Morning Kenya, and let's just keep this train going. Remember, today is Monday and we always get to focus on matters concerning the family. But if you are just joining us, karibu tena sana. My name is Jane Mamboy. Remember, you can always talk to us via our communication platforms. On Twitter, you can find us using the handle at KBC Channel 1. Our official hashtag for this program is Good Morning Kenya. My handle is Jane Mamboy. Our SMS number is 20154 and our Facebook page is KBC Channel 1 TV. So today being Monday, we always get to focus on matters concerning the family. And today we are going to be looking at parenting and just trying to compare, how our parents raised us and the new generation of parents that we are having, that is the millennials. So the previous generation of parents are called the baby bloomers and we are called the millennials. So just trying to look at the two different parenting styles and how each complements each other, and the advantages and disadvantages that came with different types of parenting that we have seen over the years, and what more we need to do to help ourselves become better parents as we try to raise the next generation of fantastic youngsters. And to help me with this discussion, I have two guests with me in studio. To my far left, we have a familiar face. He is our mentor, a motivational speaker, and a resident guest, Fred Abok. Karibu sana.
Asante sana.
Good to have you.
Good to have you too.
At the center and the next to my immediate left, we have Annabel Geshure, who is a counseling psychologist and also a life coach and the lead counselor at Limo Counseling and Mentorship Center. Karibu sana. Glad to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Once again, you can be part of this conversation via the communication platforms that we have just issued. Now, I want to start with you, Abok. We were having a conversation before we came on air, and this is in regards to the research that I had mentioned that, there's a research found that millennials, and these are the people who were born between 1981 and 1987, but the bigger bracket is 1980 to 2000, they are dubbed to be the most competent parents that history has seen so far. Do you agree with this research, first of all? Tuanzie hapo.
To some extent I do, but I also disagree, because the dynamics of parenting, actually, basically an understanding of the parenting, is providing an enablement environment from a toddler to a childhood. In parenting, environment is very necessary.
Yes.
But also the commitment too. Today's society is very agitative, but it's also very competitive, especially on the element of time. Because on the same research, we discover that on the basic millennial parenting, do between 15 minutes to nail on a daily basis with their kids. Yet we have the other generation that had a vast on time. And time is very necessary when it comes to parenting.
Okay.
But also in an environment that before the millennials, we discovered that it's basic that parenting was a communal thing. Vis-a-vis the today's society, where parenting is an individualistic ideology, and there are actually not necessary value systems that are put in place, because today's society is the media that gives on the value.
Yeah.
Parents don't have time. So I tend to disagree with that notion, because going by the trend, and the kind of attitudes and characters that you are actually seeing, the millennials are actually being weighed down based on parenting.
All right. Yeah. Annabel, I'd like to get your thoughts as well when it comes to this conclusive statement from this research that millennials are dubbed as the most competent parents that history has seen so far.
I would agree to disagree.
Yeah.
By agreeing is the millennials are very informed about parenting. For you to raise a child, it's very easy to get information on how to raise that child. But also parenting is also the process of promoting and supporting child development.
Okay.
You have to take the initiative as a parent to develop, to grow, so that you're able to parent that child. So I would agree on terms of they have learned from others, and they're also learning globally. And I would disagree in the matter of, as a millennial, you choose to be a good parent. Yeah. You choose to parent. So if you choose not to, you it will still not have that impact.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Abok, you had mentioned that, previously parenting was more of a communal affair.
Yeah.
And this is one of the key areas that this research actually highlighted, that with millennials, they are, they're tailoring their parenting styles to the needs of their individual families and challenging these traditional norms. Do you think this is helping the millennials or not? The fact that we're challenging the traditional norms that mtoto si wa jamii, it doesn't take a village anymore. It's about me and tailoring my parenting to my child.
To some extent, I do agree because of the basic dynamics of the today's society. The proxy of this today's society is actually so way loose to an extent that you cannot trust a child with another person. But also on the other extent, we cannot deny the fact that exposure is the mother of invention. And not everything a child has an opportunity to learn at home. So wherever we confine our children to basically the knowledge and the ideologies of what we carry, we deny them the opportunity to explore and get to understand how the society out there gets run. And that's why the only basic outlet that we can actually be able to have for our children is the media.
Yeah.
And this actually confiscate our children dynamically to an extent that they really don't understand what are the value systems, but also what are the common standards on the environment that actually actuate what a child ought to be.
Okay.
So it is in one way, as much as I agree with it, but it's also very limiting to the exposure and the holistic growth of a child.
Do you agree with what Abok is saying, given that, the fact that you are tailoring your parenting style to the needs of your children and your family is limiting and, just challenging the traditional norms? Do you think it's limiting as opposed to being more empowering to the children in terms of challenging the traditional norms that have always been there about parenting?
Yeah, I agree with him.
Yeah.
The millennial parenting, it's not communal in terms of tradition, what we know in the tradition theme.
Sense, yeah.
But it's communal in the part of peers, the teachers. Most of our teachers are doing the parenting on behalf of the parents.
Okay.
So the children are learning from their environment. And that is part of the 21st century communalism. Yeah, but dropping down to the families, we have that individual perspective, which is growing because of we are also growing as a country, as a people, as the 21st century, and that is something that we can change as families. Abok's family, my family, your family. Yeah.
All right. Now, I
think one notion that I need to clearly underscore is that we are in a serious crisis, Jen.
Yeah. Today,
the millennials are actually courting and marrying their cousins, because they are actually not aware of how the communal is based. This as it does, it's a taboo, and this precedence actually is a recipe for a confused and a traumatizing norm that is in the family. So it needs to be watched out.
It is, and you've just mentioned that. I remembered one of the training topics we were talking about last week, where there's this millennial couple, they wanted to get married, and they were getting married next month in February, and just this month, the groom's father eloped with the bride's mother.
It's
what
chaotic.
are we doing to our children?
It's chaotic.
It's very chaotic.
Yeah.
Now, I want us to look at a few aspects that, when it comes to parenting that I find to be very essential. And you had mentioned, the whole aspect of time. And I'd like to start with the presence of our parents. And, I'd like to hear from you from a man's perspective, because traditionally, mothers were the home makers, caregivers. They are the ones who are raising the children. So, time was never a problem with our mothers. But comparing baby bloomers when it comes to the fathers especially, their presence when it comes to parenting, comparing our parents and the millennials right now, what difference would you say there is when it comes to their presence in parenting the children?
For me to clearly articulate this,
from a man's point of view,
yes, it's important to understand that parenting is not learned. Parenting is caught.
Okay.
And a relationship is very important and very fundamental when it comes to parenting. The millennials want to make more money and treat kids well. They do not really get to understand the basic aspect of love. Love is not about the material that you give to the children, because we do not invest for our children. We need to invest in our children. Investing in them means having quality time but also very quantitative, in a manner that we get to relate with them in an essence of getting to understand them, but also show them what they ought to be. Now, the millennials have actually tried to shift this to the machines and gadgets that can actually be able to complement this element. So it demystifies the practicability of parenting. But also on the other context, you discover that the baby bloomers had the opportunity to actually walk the talk with their children rather than show the deed with the children. Now, we expect our children to learn as a result of what we say, not what we do. And chances are high that they will pretend to learn from what you do and activate what they see others doing. And that's why you find that the media and the neighborhood, which is in quotes not really authentic, get to be the mentors of our kids rather than us ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Do you agree with that? The baby bloomers were more present as opposed to millennials who now have the alternative of gadgets to, sort of assist in the parenting process?
Yeah, I agree with that, but I also agree to disagree. We have love languages. The love language for children is time. Their love, to them, love is time.
Yeah.
You can be with them for a whole day, but not spend time with them. As he was saying, quality time. And as a parent, that is something that you should practice. Time. We have careers to develop, we have families to build, we have
these children to feed.
Children to feed, but you can schedule it.
Yeah.
It's intentional, make it intentional. This is my time with my children. And also something else I'm seeing in this generation, we are imitating what the other family is doing. This mom is practicing the time aspect by taking the children to school in the morning. Maybe that is not you. Get to know what gels in your family, what gels with your children,
what works well.
And create that time. Okay. Maybe it's dinner time. That is when, maybe it's storytelling.
Yeah.
Get to know
what works best for your family.
Yeah.
All right, excuse me. Now, another aspect that I want to bring in that is closely related to this whole aspect of presence is the research also indicated that, looking at baby bloomers and millennials, you find that baby bloomers, they were more about creating wealth in their parenting styles, and millennials are more about creating experiences with their children in terms of parenting, and that also intertwines with the whole issue of timing, because for most of us, our parents used to work late nights, early morning. At least for us who are now in the millennial bracket. But they were more concentrated about, I need to provide for my family, I need to do this, I need to do that. But you find millennials are inclined towards experiences with their children. How does that, augur with you when it comes to parenting?
Jen, that's pretty dynamic. That the essential, the aspect that it's good and it's also pretty challenging.
Yeah.
Experiences are good that it exposes the kids to get to understand the basic aspect of life. And I think one of the research that I participated in is that actually kids who are exposed to experiences earlier tend to adopt into the systems and be able to be more independent. Yeah. But the other aspect is that when it comes to the provision, it shows them the responsibility. And the basic needs of a child to be able to grow into a dependent person is to have that provision from a parent and get to know the basic of what parenting means. It's by provision. Okay. So when parents provide, they create wealth, the basic is that they more or less, show, or train their child into an understanding that the family component is about provision, is about care, and is about enablement to be the better person, rather than experience. Because, experience sometimes can actually turn someone to be on a survival mood. And when a survival mentality comes in, there is a quote, independence. And, people are being in a society that they don't need anyone. It's them, themselves, and God. Okay. And in that aspect, you find we raise up an irresponsible society that does not care about who else. In the former scenario, It is on the basis of provision. That's why you find that the older kids could actually pick up the younger ones and, you know, help them out in providing for education. Today's society, everyone is independent. You know, you took me to school, that is your responsibility. If I'm grown up, I need to, you know, it's me, myself, and my family. And so there's a disconnect of the reunion that is basically needed because they were not raised up on such a manner.
Do you agree with these thoughts, you know, given that the baby bloomers were more focused on, you know, creating wealth for the family, the parents, their parenting style, in as much as it, you know, it deprived them of some privileges, but they were more focused on creating wealth for the family as opposed to millennials who are more, you know, involved with the family, and then they want to just create more of the experiences with the family?
Yeah, I agree with that. In the millennial world, experiences are also, you create experiences to create connections. And as a family, when children, that is how you're going to attend your children kindergarten graduation. You're going to attend different places, resorts, to view different experiences with them.
Birthdays.
Because with our children, that is their art of learning.
Yeah.
That is the process of learning. We are training them to be creative, but they can't be creative by keeping them indoors or doing the norm. We have the media that will expose them. So as a parent, you also have to challenge yourself to be the person who creates the experiences for them, for you to have that family bond and that connection.
All right.
Yeah.
So in this aspect, which side of the divide do you think had it right? The baby bloomers or the millennials in terms of creating wealth or experiences with your family, from your point of view?
From my point of view, I think for the baby bloomers,
Yeah.
they were not exposed to what we have now. That led to their limit. It was a limitation to at their time.
All right.
But for us, we are privileged to have that
More resources.
Yeah, that resource. Yeah.
Abok.
But of course, also it's important to create a balance because, you know, exposure is also a privilege for us to be able to develop. You know, ignorance is actually a deficiency in what is required to be able to develop. So I believe that as much as we are actually partaking of the experience, it's also important to, you know, blend it on with the provision so that people get to understand the responsibility that is required, the basic responsibility, but also understands that it is important to have an experience of different events and opportunities.
All right. Now, another aspect that, you know, dubbed millennials as, you know, the most competent parents in history is when it comes to decision making in the family. You find that baby bloomers did not really involve children when it comes to the decision making process, as opposed to millennials who are more and progressively including the children when it comes to the decision making process when it for family matters. How do you, you know, resonate with this whole aspect when you compare the two parenting styles? Do you think the baby bloomers might have done better, or they did what they could with what they had?
In one way, I tend to support the millennials because in this area,
Finally,
you know, the trends and the dynamic changes in the system today has exposed our kids into a more vulnerable situation that information is so important. You know, today we have pedophiles all over.
Yes.
And you know, it's a scenario that you can actually not just let your kids be actually exposed to any kind of a person. It is important to make them informed in a scenario. Now, in the baby bloomers, you discover that the decision you needed to be a yes person. You know, it's a soldier kind of a lifestyle, and it denies them the privilege to be to mature up because decisions were made for them, and that's why even the issues of spanking was in the school because that was the only language. But today we have discovered that, you know, spanking do not change kids, but reasoning and understanding do change. So when we have an opportunity to reason with kids, we get to show them the way rather than direct them to the way. And you know, probably I believe Annabel will agree with me that even on counseling, we do not tell people what to do. We direct them to what they ought to do. And that is based on the reasoning.
Okay.
Yes, so that's millennials.
Do you also support millennials when it comes, do you support this, you know, statement, you know, when that millennials are better parents when it comes to the decision-making process by involving the children? That in itself helps them parent better.
Yes, 100% I agree with that.
Yeah.
Allow me to give an illustration.
Please do.
Some time back, I had the experience of a parent, the mommy was driving and the child was on the back left. So the mom drank water while driving. The boy asked told the mom, "Mom, you've broken a rule. You know, the advert we watch on TV says, do not drink and drive."
Ooh.
So the mommy told him, "It is not water, it's alcohol." The boy told the mom, "It is not written water, it is written do not drink and drive."
Challenging.
Yeah.
And that also now brings me to the other aspect that, you know, still points out millennials as better parents, and this is now the communication process. Communication between baby bloomers and their children and millennials and their children. Just as you have mentioned, a very good example, you know, the fact that in this day and time, millennials are able to have that open channel of communication with their kids. But compared to baby bloomers, it was one-way street. Nikisema nimesema. If I say this, you do this. If I say jump, you jump. You don't ask how high. Looking at these two different types of parenting, how do you say, you know, how does it complement the parenting styles that they employed and how the children were brought up? Abok, let me start with you.
I think, Jane, you're really fixing me to, you know, discredit the baby bloomers. But based on the environmental dynamics of that particular time, it was essential for parenting to be done on that way.
Okay.
But of course, you know, changes has taken place in the society. That today there are more exposures. This KBC that we are in used to start at midday. Today it is open 24 hours, and you know, there is no restrictions. In fact, the only prefect of these all media stations is Mutua, that we go to pray for him that, you know, he be alive, and so that he can actually be able to encroach the watertight scenario. But now it is essential to understand that communication is so essential in parenting, because whatever you do not communicate to your child, the society out there is willing to communicate with them. So it is all issues are dynamic, that we need to be authentic in our communication, but also you know, time conscious in the communication, because everything is actually vumbling and active for the attention of our children. So the millennial has actually done it well, that we are actually not coincidental in what we're doing, especially for an example, issues of sexuality, you know. It's something that for today's millennials, it cannot be avoided, because people want to know their sexuality. You know, the recent census brought on a new dynamics of things, that there are people who are neither male or no female. And you know, without getting on to have a proper understanding, those are people who actually can suffer in the society if that communication is not really made on good time. But also the individualistic aspect of understanding yourself and getting to know who am I, whose am I, and what am I supposed to do. This actually preempts on communication to be very essential. So it is not something that is advantageous. It is the norm and is paramount that has to be done.
But you know, still on the same issue of communication, I believe communication has always been there since time immemorial. It is only a choice that you choose to make as a parent, whether you want to listen to your kid or not.
Very true, but you know, the baby bloomers actually took it that
regardless of whatever time or age we're in.
Listen, you know, you could not sit down and tell your parents, I have a girlfriend, before you are 18. Because the thing is that you'll not be replied. The slap will pass on your face.
That in itself is communication.
Yes, and you know, the way it was it was devoid because of lack of exposure. But you know, today, you know, you see it on the TV. So what happens is that, you know, the basic place that kids want to learn communication is to sit in their parent. The baby bloomers were naive, and those are the days that, you know, if you hold your wife's hand, anakuambia uoni watoto wanatuangalia, wewe ni nini, you know, you hold and, you know, you say people are looking at us. So everything was limited to the locker in the bedroom, lights off, and everything is done under the blanket. Today there are things that actually ought to be done so that the kids get to know how parenting is well done.
Annabel, do you think the millennials have gotten it better when it comes to communication, especially with their children?
Yes, I think they're doing a great job.
Yeah.
But for the baby bloomers, it was unidirectional. Their communication was unidirectional. It's either my way or no way.
Yeah, you can't say no.
Yeah, my way or no way. But for the millennials, it's bidirectional. Parent-child. They listen to the child, and also the child also. They learn from each other.
Yeah.
Like in the scenario just gave a while ago, the mother learned something I also learned the intelligence of that boy. That boy is so intelligent. I've never thought something like that myself. So I think in the millennials, communication, it's an art that they have learned, and they have made a choice to perfect it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I work a lot with schools, and I'm able to spot a child who has an open line with the parents. They can tell you anything, anywhere. They are free because the parents have nurtured that communication. The child is able to express themselves freely, anywhere, anytime.
Okay.
So it's as far as communication
Goes.
as far as communication goes, it's the parents should also use it as a point of nurturing, because everything comes from the point of communication.
Okay.
You get to understand your child better from the point of communication. You understand what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, what do they love, what do they love experiencing. Yeah.
All right. Now, one more aspect before you move to the different parenting styles that are being adopted these days is one thing that you had actually mentioned, Abok, as we started. This is in regards to what baby bloomers were doing and what millennials are doing. And it is said that baby bloomers were more of telling and millennials are more of showing when it comes to whatever activity you may be involved with your children. Now, looking at the two, do you think, you know, the way baby bloomers did actually produce a very all-rounded child as opposed to how millennials are doing it right now, getting down and doing it with the child?
True. You know, just an agreement, you know, when it comes to parenting, it's essential to understand that it's a relationship. It's not a directive. And the paradigm shift here is that the baby bloomers actually raised kids who are actually stereotyped into the way that they believe things, and you know, and essentially the way they activate those particular things. That's why when you see a relationship, you know, I'm more into marital counseling, and you know, you tend to give direction to some of the things that ought to be done. Some people don't get to understand you, you know, because the way they were brought up, you know, it was a directive rather than the reasoning. And so it is either my way or no way. So it limits the availability of consensus, and it promotes, you know, a one-way system of communication that limits the opportunity to find a way out of a particular thing. So you discover that that one, I believe that the baby bloomers did fail in that they did not provide an opportunity for an environment of grace. And it limits the children from learning by making mistakes, so that they can actually find an environment of correction to be able to make things right.
Okay.
It is essential to understand, Jane, that people don't change by how strict we are. People change because when they know the right thing to do. And the right thing is basically based on the reasoning and getting to understand the way out of the quagmire that they find themselves in.
Okay. Now, we do say that the baby bloomers are more of telling than showing how to do things as opposed to the millennials, but it is this same baby bloomers who raised these millennials who are looking to change this aspect. So do you feel it is a way of, you know, millennials just trying to change and let the baby bloomers understand that it's not just about telling, but telling and showing when it comes to parenting?
Yes, for the millennials, parenting is more of showing, of talking and showing. And that is why our children, we are nurturing the independent children. They are able, they are able to grow in their space. They are able to explore.
Yeah.
They are able to be creative. When the baby bloomers, that is why we were limited. You limit the interaction with the environment. So the only source of learning is you. And it's not, you're not nurturing their strength. You're using your strengths to nurture them. So all they know is to follow your way.
Yeah.
But for the millennials, you're encouraging the creativity, the creative, in them. That is where that is how you nurture responsibility.
Okay.
So the child is responsible in his own minor doings.
Okay. Now, I want us to quickly look at 4 different types of parenting that, are parenting styles that millennial have been said to have adopted. And maybe you could just let us know briefly, which one you think is best in this day and time that we're living in. And I want us to start with the first one. It's called the authoritarian parenting style. This is where, it's more of what the baby bloomers used to do, my way or no way. And, from your personal experience as a counseling psychologist, do you think this way is helping in any way, or it's just continuing to put more damage to the whole situation when it comes to parenting? The fact that your children, it's all about rules. There's no room for flexibility or creativity. If it's my house, my rules. What do you make of this parenting style?
Yeah, it's doing more harm than good.
Yeah.
Most children who grow up in authoritarian family, they are always, let me use the word, allergic to law. They are never law abiding.
Yeah.
Because they are from a family where they follow rules, they follow laws. So outside, they want to challenge the laws,
those laws,
to be able to explore themselves. That should have been done in the family setup, because that is where you're supposed to create that warmth. So, and I would, as parents, we need to always review and evaluate ourselves. What is our parenting style? Are you we always know if you're authoritarian, if you're So review, evaluate, and what can you change? Because as we said, it's a process of learning. Okay. Parenting is a process of learning. So, and whatever you can undo, unlearn it.
Do it.
Yeah.
All right. Abok, your thoughts on the same, this authoritarian kind of parenting, because some would argue that it worked with me and I turned out pretty great. So I'm going to use the same parenting style with my kids in this day and time. We're given all the resources that we have. You choose to still go the authoritarian way.
Great. Jen, I would like to encourage a balanced system, because a society that has no systems, has no authority, adherence to what is required. Now, the presence of the law does not mean the absence of grace, because even in the good book, when God loved the children of Israel, the number one thing that he gave them in the 10 commandments.
Yes.
And in these commandments, he gave them so that they can have a guideline on how to be able to go to the promised land. Life is dynamic, but it's also based on the promises that you have, the way you live it. When there is a leeway to be able to do what you feel that you ought to do, chances are high that you tend to go the opposite way, unless there are consequences to that. Now, we are told that choices have consequences, and when you need to be guided into the right choices so that you avoid the consequences of the bad things. The authority guides us into letting us understand what are the consequences of doing the wrong thing. And so that this will actually enable us to be oriented to the activation that life is a warfare, it's not a fanfare. Because everything is struggling and is urging on for your attention, regardless of the situation, the scenario. Because, for example, issues of time, issues of discipline, these are issues that can actually be entrenched only where there is an authority. When we try to be so lenient about them, chances are high that we'll play out with them. And there has never been excellence without discipline. And discipline cannot thrive where there is no authority.
All right.
So I would want to balance it in a scenario that as much as there is a point of grace that they can be able to reason, but let us also show some significance of authority.
All right. Yes. So you wouldn't be full supportive of the authoritarian style of parenting?
I would not.
All right.
But to an extent, there is ought to be.
All right. That actually brings me to the next style of parenting that I want us to talk about very briefly. I'm being told we're almost out of time. And this is the authoritative style of parenting. Now, in this case, yes, there are rules and guidelines to be followed, but the parent allows room for the child to communicate. Do you think this is the parenting style that could go a long way in helping raise an all-rounded society and that has children who are, all-rounded in essence?
Yeah, it's the best parenting style. As a parent, using the authoritative style, you're able to bring up a child who is able to make decisions, who is resilient, who is able to stand for themselves. And it is a journey. Something else that people do wrong in this style is you start practicing it with your children when they are 15 or 12. It never works.
You have to start early.
You have to start early.
Okay.
So as they grow, they are able to, they know that they start, you already created the warmth for them to approach you.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I think, Abok, you already agreed with that style of parenting before we got to it. But very, very briefly, when it comes to authoritative style of parenting, yes, there are rules, but I allow room for communication to hear you out.
Yeah, allow me to be very short on this, in that, we are not raising zombies. We are raising intelligent kids who are actually exposed to dynamics of the society. So it's important to give them room to actually get to express their feelings, but also their desires freely without not being constrained and in fear.
All right.
Yes.
Now, the two last categories of parenting styles that have been termed to be very destructive, and I want you to speak about them as we bring the conversation to a close, are the permissive and the uninvolved parents. Permissive are those parents who always say, yes, you want this? Yes, baby. You want to go there? Yes, honey. You want to break this table? Go ahead, honey. This kind of parents, and those who are completely uninvolved. I want to go out tonight, whatever, do whatever you want. Those two kinds of parents. Maybe what would you like to speak when it comes to this kind of parenting style and how damaging it is to children as you give your closing remarks?
For the two, the permissive and the uninformed.
Involved.
Yeah, and uninvolved. The children tend to know everything revolves around me, myself, and I. So, and that most of the challenges we're having in this generation, we have the egocentrism. So your child, without you, they can't survive.
Yeah.
So any individual using the permissive parenting, what I would advise them is, at some point, you will not be there for your child.
Yeah.
Teach them, nurture them on how to stand for themselves, and let them know there are others. They live in a community. It is not me, myself, and I.
Okay.
Yeah, because they need that in future.
All right.
Yeah.
Abok, as we close the discussion, speak about permissive and uninvolved parents, and most of these parents are said to have been acting from what they experienced as children, because the permissive, they tend to be so permissive because they were denied so much and they were growing up, and the uninvolved, they're just, keeping the cycle going.
Now, this is the challenge I have with the millennials, because, they tend to invest for their kids rather than invest in their kids. And just as I said earlier, that life is about warfare. It's not a fanfare. And, there are structures that needs to be be cautious in life, so that we get to be able to be potentially available and active in that life. Where people are permissive and everything is available, people tend to be, spontaneous in what they are doing. And this is a recipe for disaster, in that people do not understand the boundaries and actually the systems of how to be able to handle particular things. Life is an experience of each day, and it dynamically changes on the value systems that you own. If there are no those values in the first place, then which means that you are vulnerable to any attack that comes on your way. Permissive children are disastrous permissive parents are disastrous to their children, in that they allow their children to actually be involved without getting to understand the consequences of that involvement. So at the end of it, it becomes disastrous, because they are exposed to everything, even regardless of the things that actually attacks their values and denies them the opportunity to understand the right thing.
So the authoritative way of parenting is considered to be the most constructive and helpful for our children.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have been talking about parenting, just trying to compare the baby bloomers, our parents, and we, the millennials, when it comes to parenting, because as research says, millennials are termed as history's most competent parents. And every time I say that, Abok ananiangalia na macho ingine, it is not me, it is research. But that brings us to a close of this discussion. Of course, everything is about a balance.